Council meeting for June 27th already of 2023, 6 p.m. here in council chambers. We'll begin with the land acknowledgement first of all, and that is we are pleased to be here today on traditional territory of Treaty 6. We acknowledge that all those who keep a deep connection with this land. The City of Beaumont respects the histories, languages, and culture of all of Canada's First Peoples, whether they be of First Nation, Métis, or Inuit descent, and appreciates that their presence continues to enrich Canada's vibrant communities. As we gather here in the traditional territory of Treaty 6, we acknowledge that we are all treaty people, among the responsibilities to protect, honor all of life. Before I begin our City Council meeting, you may notice to my left a council chair that's empty this evening. Earlier today, Councillor Rene Tessier submitted his resignation from City Council. He is moving his family outside of Beaumont and has subsequently is not qualified to be a councillor going forward. So we regret his decision from a council perspective, but we're happy for him to just make a decision for his family, and that's the most important thing for sure. So I want to acknowledge his contribution to council the last 20 months. It's been a very fast 20 months. Rene had a lot of passion and he was always prepared for meetings and always liked to argue inside and outside council. One of his best qualities, I think, honestly, was his passion and his vigor for his job as a councillor. So I want to thank him on behalf of council for his contribution and wish him very well in his future endeavors. There will be a report coming to council on July 11th regarding the procedure for a by-election to take place in the fall. So that'll be disclosed and discussed at July 11th council meeting. Thank you very much. And again, congratulations to Rene on his next chapter in his life. Next on our agenda is the adoption of the agenda. Madam Clerk, is there any changes to the agenda this evening?
Thank you, Mayor. Administration does not have any additions to the agenda this evening.
Thank you. Member Council willing to move the adoption of the agenda as presented. Councillor Barnhart. Oh.
So moved.
Thank you, Councillor. Discussion on the motion. Seeing none from council, would you please vote on the agenda? And that carries unanimously 6-0. Next on our agenda is open forum. Madam Clerk, I believe we have 2 open forums this evening. Would you care to get us started, please?
Thank you, Mayor. We do have 2 open forum presentations. The first open forum presentation that we have is Andrea and her husband, if they'd like to come up to the front.
Okay. Give me a second to get your mic on for you, okay? I'm pressing the mic button. Oh, there we are. Okay. Welcome to City Council. These mics are very directional, so please speak right into the microphone and you'll have 5 minutes to present to us. Please state your name and your address and the reason you're here and begin your presentation when you're ready.
Okay, my name is Andrea Delahite. We live at 5401 41 Avenue in Beaumont, and we are here to discuss our sidewalks.
Okay, please proceed when you're ready.
Okay.
Just pull the mic a little closer to your face if you don't mind.
Sorry.
It's okay.
My husband's name is Darren Hess.
Hi.
So we have been requesting for 3 years now that the sidewalk outside of our home be repaired. We started contacting the city in 2020, and I spoke to somebody named, Tyler or Taylor. I'm not sure. I don't recall his name completely. Anyway, it was a little bit late in the summer when we originally contacted him. And so he said it would probably be put off to the following year, which was fine. We understood that. The following year, I was in contact with a person at the city, and she was very helpful. Her name was Sarah, I believe. She was very helpful in constantly keeping in touch and saying, they're going to come look at it. They're going to, review it, that sort of thing. Nothing ever came of it though. So it was put off again. And this year when I contacted, last year when I contacted the city, at first they said, well, that person is no longer there. Therefore the ticket was closed. So she had to reopen the ticket. So this year I haven't heard anything, and I contacted the city again and was told that our sidewalks are not going to be done. So the person who contacted me said that there's no budget for it. So the sidewalk is cracked all the way through. It's uneven. It's difficult to shovel snow. It's painful to shovel snow. The shovel hits the uneven edges, and our snow blower we've had to have repaired at a couple $100 because the skid plate on the bottom is completely trashed from hitting the uneven sidewalk. Our taxes keep going up. I've asked repeatedly if somebody then is going to come and shovel our walks for us, because it's difficult to do. And we're told, well, no, that's not going to happen. So I escalated this here because I feel like everywhere that we've turned, we're getting the same answer. Again, it has been 3 years. And I was also told that, well, there's sidewalks all over Beaumont. You know, some are worse than yours. And that's really not an answer that I'm looking for. I spoke to Bryce the other day, and he said that truthfully, the budget is low for the infrastructure for sidewalks. So we're here to respectfully request that that budget possibly be increased so that we can have our sidewalks repaired. It's been a problem for us for 3 years, and we would prefer it not go into 4, 5, and 6 years.
Okay. Appreciate that. You would just say anything, sir? In addition to?
Yeah, no, just the same thing for me. For me, it's a safety perspective, right? You know, the uneven surfaces can create a trip hazard. So take a lot of pride in our community and the way it looks, and the sidewalks actually look horrible, and they just get worse every year with the frost heaving. And like my wife said, it's difficult to shovel snow. At times you get jarred when you're shoveling because you can't see where the cracks are. And then with the snow blower, it's absolutely, it's not effective with the snow blower. It actually creates more problems and everything. And it's a long area for us to shovel. So safety is my number one concern. People walking, we have a lot of people walking through the community, using the sidewalks, and we take pride in our community to keep the sidewalks clean, and it's not very effective to shovel right now. And we're not the only sidewalk in the neighborhood. The grass is an indicator in the sidewalks, right? It's growing right up in between, and it's no different than a serious pothole on a highway. It's a thoroughfare for people to use. And if it's not safe, then it's going to, somewhere down the line, somebody's going to, if it hasn't happened already, somebody might get potentially hurt with a trip hazard, uneven surface, or the shoveling aspect of it.
Okay, appreciate that. And sorry, your address, what area are you in? Which area of Beaumont?
We're in Brookside,
Brookside.
and we are in the corner of a cul-de-sac. So we have a large sidewalk.
Yeah, I had one of those myself, last house. Yeah, I know those sidewalks be quite lengthy. Appreciate your presentation. Any questions from members of council before I ask a question myself? Councilor McGough Swain and Councilor Miller. Sam?
Sure. Thanks. Maybe thank you for coming in and sharing it. Maybe just a question for administration around, you know, our annual program that we have that goes through and assesses. Just explain for council and the audience around how we assess these throughout the city.
CEO Schwartz.
Certainly. But first of all, I want to thank you for coming in and providing that feedback. It does definitely show that you care, and we have a lot of people in our community that do care. We assess sidewalk repairs based on a 1, 2, 3 priority. And then we use the allocated budget to typically get to the priority 1, sometimes to the priority 2. There's an actual science to measuring how much it's cracked from the tripping hazard. So unfortunately, and Bryce is correct, we've got a certain amount of budget allocation each year that we then have to divide up into those priorities. And it sounds like yours hasn't gotten up to number 1 yet. And I know that's not the answer you want to hear, but that's how we assess repairs. The notion of tripping hazards is considered in that inspection. And that's how they get to the priority 1, 2, and 3. So it may look really bad to you and I, and there's other places that are worse. That's how we allocate.
And just a quick follow-up, just the process, and if you don't know it, obviously we're putting you on the spot here, so feel free to defer it. We can ask for information after, but how do we assess, like, I doubt we have someone that goes and looks at every sidewalk, right, in a cul-de-sac down in Brookside. Like, would someone walk it? Like, how would we know whether that's actually made it to a review to be P1, 2, or 3?
Between our safety codes inspections who are out in the field on a regular basis and our operations folks, yes, we do. We know the areas that are getting degraded, and we go out and we inspect them. It's documented. It has to be.
Okay. Ash, we'll go down a different path. I'll leave it there and then I'll come back.
Councilor Miller. Ashley, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for coming in. I'm looking at your house. I know this area quite well. The sidewalks are like, you know, this is an older area. So I can understand how they're, maybe older and the divots, like where they are connecting are a little bit lower, but this is a 2014 Google picture. So you're, just to clarify, you're speaking more to the cracks, because on this picture from 2014, it doesn't look like it. So I'm assuming it's become quite worn, there's cracks, and is it unlevel, causing that jarred, like feeling and stuff once you're shoveling, snow blower? Yeah. So, for me, the safety concern of it is just what I wanted to clarify, because, Google doesn't do justice when you're looking at it. So, and then I was going to ask the process as well, which Councillor Monkoff-Swain covered. So unless there's any other questions, that's all I have.
You good?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Well, I think the best way to proceed then is you come to council. We do appreciate your coming to see us. Please send an email to me directly. My email address is on the website. I give my business card if you stick around a little later. I give you to it. Please send me an email outlining your concern again and the ticket number you had from previously. Any pictures you can supply. I'll pass on administration and we'll have administration will reply back to you accordingly and re-explain their explanation to you in writing. So you have something in writing there. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. We appreciate your time this evening. Madam Clerk, we have a second presenter, I believe, this evening.
Thank you, Mayor. We do have a second presenter for the open forum, Mr. Jeremy Cornell. I'd like to move up to the front.
Even Mr. Cornell, welcome back to council. You have about 5 minutes, as you know, from previous presentations. So we'll have council questions after that. So you've got 5 minutes when you're ready.
Okay. Yes, as stated, my name is Jeremy Cornell, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you tonight. I am here today as the chair of the Beaumont Arts Council. In the room with me today, offering support are many members of both the BAC and the Beaumont Society for the Arts. So I want to start by recognizing that all of you, this council that we currently have proven to be the most supportive of the arts that any of us has seen in our many years living in Beaumont. The efforts by yourselves and the preceding council to forward the Beaumont Arts policy and subsequent formation of the BAC has been amazing, and we are all very grateful and applaud the support that the current council and mayor has shown for the arts and culture in Beaumont. So thank you. That said, we are concerned about a proposal to sunset the BAC that you will be discussing later this evening. We are, as a group, unsure of the intent behind this proposed move. The proposal is to merge the BAC with another board, and for that new board, there is currently no terms of reference or guidelines onto how this will operate. It feels a little bit like putting the cart before the horse. I would remind you that a dedicated group of volunteers invested many hours into the creation of a terms of reference before the BAC ever got off the ground, so that when we did start operating, we had a reference to guide us in our actions. We are also very disappointed that this proposal came to yourselves before there was any discussion with the BAC or other committees. And we feel that the short survey that was conducted by the city earlier in the spring was flawed in that it came out later than it was promised with a very short deadline. And the majority of BAC members, myself included, never saw this survey or were able to complete it due to not receiving the email or having a busy schedule at this time of year. Speaking on behalf of BAC members, we all feel like we are just starting to see some forward progress in this group. It has taken us 10 years to get to this point, from our initial lobbying for more arts support, to the creation of an arts policy, to the writing of terms of reference, to actually getting the BAC up and running. Much of this was guided by volunteers who freely gave so much of our valuable time due to our passion for the arts in Beaumont. When we started on this path, the arts and culture were lumped in with Parks and Rec, to the point where not even the CFO could tell us how much Beaumont was investing into the arts each year. We have fought hard for the autonomy of the arts, and we don't want to see a return to the old ways, which it seems like this proposal would do. The BAC started playing catch up when a couple years ago, we had to fight through COVID, and it was hard to get up and off the ground with the Zoom meetings and such. But we finally feel like we're now starting to get ahead where we can start expanding our reach and realizing some of the amazing potential that this committee holds. We have plans to get more involved in arts planning in Beaumont by engaging with even more local groups and artists. And we have since day one had a goal to create an annual calendar of arts and culture events, something that we had talked about starting to see happen for 2024. We've had discussions that meeting quarterly is not even enough to accomplish all that we have in mind as a group. And we are already discussing and looking to change our terms of reference to include either bi-monthly or even monthly meetings moving into 2024. Including additional meetings for strategy planning in the summer and additional planned schedules for coming to council to report on our efforts and progress. We believe that as the city moves forward with the planning and development of an arts facility in Beaumont, the BAC could play an integral role as a sounding board for such a endeavor. We have a strong, passionate group, and I firmly believe there is a huge potential for the Beaumont Arts Committee. We've had a chance, you have had a chance to be known as a council that supports arts and culture in Beaumont. We have taken a huge step forward over the last 4 years with the BAC, and we don't want to see you be the council that takes us 2 steps backwards to square one. That's all.
Thank you for being inside your time. More time for questions then. Appreciate that, Jeremy. Questions from members of council for our presenter. Councilman Cuff Swain, Sam, you have the floor.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor, and appreciate you coming in and all the support from the audience here for sure. I think your comments outlined the position pretty clearly, so thank you for that. The question I had for you, Jeremy, is, the recommendation from administration, as you mentioned, is to sunset it. There's an alternate option in there that talks about preparing a new bylaw that addresses, and I'll quote here, the legislative and governance matters. So just curious from your perspective, if you guys have done some thinking through, or as you've been part of this, if you would identify or be aware of any of these legislative or governance matters that you think would need to be addressed if we were to go through that secondary path. So is there anything in the bylaws that you've looked at now that you guys see as an arts council that you have concerns with?
I think as an arts council, our concern, more so than the bylaws, our concern is, first of all, that we're looking to, like, as I mentioned, putting the cart before the horse, merging some groups without having the bylaws and the terms of reference laid out before they start operating. And admin is telling us that, well, we'll just figure that out as we go. And that doesn't sound like reasonable planning to me and to our group. I think our biggest concern is, just as I mentioned, just the stepping backwards and lumping in the arts with the parks and rec and culture into one body again. And on the surface, it looks like, yeah, maybe that would work, but I could see over time, subsequent councils, subsequent mayors, this all degrading back to where we were 20 years ago or 10 years ago, just
yeah, no, I appreciate that position for sure, and you outlined that very well. It's just, and it's a little bit tough because it was discussed in closed session, so I can't really dive into it. But in the public document here, it talks about addressing those governance concerns. So I was just curious if you guys thought that there were any, and so what I'm hearing from you is no.
Not off the top of my head. I haven't delved into it that deeply, into that part of it. No.
Sure. So no problem. Okay, that's all that I had for this. Obviously, when we get into the debate, we'll talk through that. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Barnard. Kathy, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you very much for coming in. I know there wasn't a lot of notice and preparing for this on top of everything else and losing roots and everything just happening. So appreciate the time you took to do that. I wonder if you could perhaps just, I know you've articulated some of it in terms of the amount of progress that's been made at the Arts Council. Could you maybe hit some of the highlights about this past year? I mean, I know it, but I just wanted to maybe highlight for council some of the things that have actually occurred that wouldn't have happened before the Arts Council was there.
Great. So I think the biggest thing we've accomplished is to get kind of caught up. And like I said, we started out a little behind the 8 ball with the funding, where we were playing catch up last year to try and get funding out to individuals and artists and groups who had applied through our granting, and we had to establish the granting process and documentation, and there was a lot of work involved in that. So we were a little bit behind the 8 ball in 2021, getting that going. But as we moved into 2022, we kind of were ahead of that, and we had a great session earlier in the year where we awarded just about $50,000 in funding to a number of individuals and groups who had applied. We've had an overwhelming, the demand far exceeds the funding, I guess is what I will say, because we have $100,000 in funding and well over $200,000 in requests for that funding. And as I mentioned, we had some great discussions and managed to award 50,000 with plans to award another 50 later in the year. So I think the funding part of it, we've made great progress on, and we're getting to the point where that's just kind of starting to roll nice and smooth. And we want to start looking into some of the other goals that we've had since day one, including the, calendar of events and just kind of the collaboration side of things where we can get all of the arts and culture related groups collaborating. So there's less overlap and more sharing of resources, and just really building a strong community amongst the artists and arts groups as they get to know where they can go for support.
Thank you very much,
Thank you for the
Mr.
answer.
Cornell. Appreciate that.
Is it a follow-up or you're good?
I'll wait till the report comes back.
Yes. Any further questions from members of council? Councilman Newkirk, Steve, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you for coming in. When it comes to the terms of reference and the actual duties of the committee, is there too much there for the committee to take on right now? Or big picture at all? You've alluded to needing to add more meetings and, to build out a strategy session. And, I wonder if not enough time allocated due to the quarterly meetings has led to some, things you would wish you had more time to do falling by the wayside. What does that look like for what you guys have been able to put into it so far?
So I wouldn't say that there's not enough time or that we're overworked. I would say that we have a very passionate, dedicated group of people that wants to do more. So they're not begrudgingly doing more. We want to do more. We want to, and if that means having more meetings, we've had additional meetings this year already to discuss the funding. So in addition to our quarterly meetings, we've had separate meetings to discuss the applications and those sorts of things. And yeah, I think it's just a really dedicated group who wants to see this advance and wants to see it continue to grow and support the arts in Beaumont. So
and we'll discuss further down in the agenda. One of the pieces I've mused at a little bit is, looking at the role of, the big picture planning and the big picture moving one way and the funding allocations going another way, and, the potential to divide up those roles, right? So, there's different permutations and combinations that could happen. What does that look like from the Arts Council's perspective if we were to look at dividing up some of those roles?
well, there's definitely a concern from the Arts Council as a whole in regards to the funding portion being lumped in with the community grants funding, and having people without an arts background or without the knowledge and history and work experience in the arts allocating funding for the arts. In the same way that I would never sit on a committee to decide how much money a hockey team needs, because that isn't my forte. We just feel that we have a strong group, and we've kind of got our feet under us with this funding model, and to see it go basically back to square one, we find that disappointing. So.
Yeah, thank you. Just one more comment, I guess. The last Arts Council or the last BAC update, was missing, kind of the next layer of information around, what funding went where, and, a good meaningful summary of where that went. And I think there was a little bit of transparency missing there. Just any comment on that, given that last presentation we had in November?
No, I'm not sure what was missing, but as I mentioned in my presentation, it is our intention to, rather than just off the cuff, come in here and talk to you guys, to have a set schedule of a couple times a year where we can come in and do a presentation, like, so that it's set in advance, so we know every April and September, we're going to come here and give you a detailed report on our progress and where we're at, and submit all of the paperwork and reports and all that, because it's all, admin has done a great job of tracking all of that. So we definitely have the information.
Yeah, you bet. Yeah, and I'm kind of diving down this path, just trying to figure out what potential solutions could be out there. You'll recall I'm the person that put the motion forward to start the committee. So I'm trying to figure out how do we get to a place where, the arts stay with the artists, and the right people are deciding the right things for the arts community, while not having, potential duplication of efforts, and, all of the lake. So I'm just trying to wrap my head around all that. And thank you for answering some of those questions.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Steve. Councilor Miller. Ashley, you have the floor, then we'll kind of wrap things up.
Sure. I just had a question of clarification, maybe for admin on the recommendation that was put forward. The amalgamation of the committees, essentially sunsetting one, but essentially amalgamating it with the Recs, Parks and Culture. Would that still provide opportunity for the people within the Arts Committee to sit on the Recs, Parks and Culture Committee?
Ms. Boudia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Councillor Miller. Yes, essentially, if we were in a situation where council was of a mind to dissolve the Beaumont Arts Council as it exists today, it's not that the mandate would go away. We would take existing committees and reformulate them. So we'd have to look at everything in terms of the membership requirements, the structure of the committee, the name, the mandate. It would be a full redo of that committee if that's the direction that council ultimately goes. And I can speak to that a little bit more when we get to that item on the agenda,
Okay.
but that's the short version.
Okay, I was just curious. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Appreciate that. Oh, Councilor Cook. Kat, you have a question? You have the floor now, Kat.
Thank you, Mary. I don't have a question, just a quick comment. It's not often that you see volunteers fighting to keep volunteering and doing the work that they're doing. So it's good to see the passion here, and I appreciate you guys coming out.
Thanks.
Thanks, Kat. Appreciate that. Seeing no further questions from council, thank you, Jeremy, for your presentation. Appreciate that. We'll move on next part of our agenda, which is now the consent agenda. Madam Clerk, can you please read off the consent agenda on the screen, please?
Thank you, Mayor. That council consent to approve the following agenda items without debate. The regular council meeting minutes of June 13th, 2023. Council accept the minutes of the June 13th, 2023 regular council meeting as presented. The council accept the minutes of the June 20th, 2023 regular council meeting as presented. That the June 27th, 2023 regional initiatives update report be received as information. And that the June 27th, 2023 sorry, my apologies. I see an error here. That the June 27, 2023 Council Strategic Plan Update Q1 and Q2 2023 be received as information. And then that the June 27, 2023 Regional Initiatives Update be received as information, and that the report remain private pursuant to section of the Freedom of Information and Privacy Act 21 and 24. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Any questions from council? Seeing as a member of council willing to move the consent agenda as presented. Councilor Van Newkirk.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And move that as presented. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Discussion on the motion, council, on the consent agenda. Seeing none, council, would you please vote on the consent agenda before you? That carries unanimously 6-0. Thank you. Next on our agenda is 6.1. Business item adaptive programming opportunities in Beaumont. Amanda, you'll be presenting. Welcome back to council. Let me find your microphone here. And it's on there for you. Please proceed when you're ready.
Excellent. Good evening, Your Worship and members of council. I'm Amanda Cuthbert, Manager of Recreation. This evening, I have an informational report for you on adaptive programming opportunities in Beaumont. In May of 2022, council directed admin to prepare a report that included current adaptive programming available, opportunities for expanding programming, and programming availability. In September of 2022, admin provided council report on the current adaptive programming and the programming availability. Since the last report, admin has been researching recreation opportunities that could expand Beaumont's adaptive programming. Trends in the industry are to adapt the programming as opposed to providing adaptive specific programs. The EDI framework, what we heard report, showed participants have experienced exclusion in Beaumont. People with disabilities and their caregivers feel lost in the conversation and face barriers accessing services. Administration recognizes there is a growing need, and we will develop a service where we can assess what recreational activities and programs for individuals within our current offerings we can adapt. This would entail meeting with individuals and understanding their limitations, recreational interests, providing orientations and options within our facilities, finding equipment and programs that we can adapt for them. The benefit of this option is to include individuals in our regular operations instead of limiting them to specific programs, days, and times. With this approach, admin will be positioned to offer the most benefit to the community. Implementing this program would include training recreation staff and program contractors on inclusive programming through the Steadward Center. The Steadward Center offers expertise in adaptive physical activity and parasport development and facility accessibility audits. Financial implications of this program. So funding in the amount of $10,000 is included in the 2023 operational budget and will be used for facility audit and to begin training recreation staff. Funding to implement the adaptive inclusion program in 2024 will be proposed in the 2024 operational budget. I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Cuthbert. Appreciate that. Any questions from members of council? I have Councillor Cook, followed by Councillor Barnhart. Kat, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm glad that the DI framework was able to capture the sentiments of those with disabilities in our community and the fact that they clearly face barriers accessing some of the services. And that's a big reason why I had put this motion forward in the first place. I also appreciate that administration recognizes the growing need to develop these services. Just a few questions. When will people with disabilities have to try and register through ClickIt along with everybody else through this kind of program?
Through your worship to Councillor McCook, that is a great question. I don't know that answer. I think we would probably look, the way it stands right now, what we envision is that there would be more of an application process instead of a registration process. This way we can collect a lot of information to really get an idea of what each individual needs, because everyone's different. It's very hard to find one program to lump everyone in. So at this point in time, I would say, no, that's not the vision, is to do that with ClickIt. Hopefully more of an application process. So this can be an individual services.
Great, thank you. I think that's important. I just think with how busy our programs are and stuff, and then I appreciate the reasoning for the approach and amalgamating them with everybody else. And I think they would probably appreciate that as well. It gives them an opportunity to access a variety of programs. Just my fear would be that if they can't get into a class because it's full, then once again, they're always being bumped back. So I just want to make sure that they would still be able to access these programs. Are there other municipalities who are actively and successfully using this kind of programming?
Through your worship to Councillor McCook, I'm not sure on specific municipalities. I think talking with the Steadward Center, they worked with a lot of municipalities and different organizations to train staff to be able to incorporate training so people can offer this type of service. But I don't know anyone specifically who can say does the same program that we are planning.
Okay, perfect. So we may be one of the first. Great. And then just a couple more. Did we get any feedback from the community regarding this approach?
No, we haven't. We haven't gone out to the community about this program specifically to get feedback.
Okay, will we be doing that before anything comes forward for budget time?
We can do that, yes.
That may be beneficial, just even a little bit, just to see. I think it would probably be well received, but I also don't want to speak for them. So I think it might be beneficial just to see before we decide whether we what kind of resources we're going to invest in this. But other than that, I appreciate the information that came forward, and I look forward to seeing how this can play out. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Barnhart. Kathy?
Thank you, Mayor. First, I want to thank Councillor McCook for bringing this forward. I think it's well past its time that we haven't been able to make more progress. I know we've made some progress, but this looks like we're going to actually start to create something that will be very appropriate to the people that it's going to affect here in Beaumont. Just wondering, like, funding in the amount of $10,000 doesn't sound like a whole lot. But if we accept this for information, this is something that's going to be happening with existing resources this year. And then your plan is to bring back more detailed budget for conversation, which would be this fall sometime. So am I understanding correctly?
Yes, through your worship to Councillor Barnhart, you are correct. We are going to use the funds that we have this year to get as much done as we can. But yes, we will be bringing a request, another ask at the 2024 budget.
And is it only operating dollars that you're looking at this point? Because facilities, equipment, those kinds of things. I'm just wondering, is there also a capital budget that might be?
Not that
Okay.
we foresee at this
You don't
moment.
see that? You think we're well equipped there with the existing facilities for this? To get
Well,
the
I
swimming
don't know
pool
if I can
myself,
answer
yeah.
that one. That's a tough one.
Think about that.
We're hoping to get a facility audit done. So we'll have the Steadward Center come out and they'll take a look to see what we can do, if there's some small changes we can make so that we can make it more valuable to the residents to take advantage of the service. If they come back with a report that has a laundry list of things that we may need to upgrade, that would be a different, then I'd have to give you a different answer.
Yeah, just, thinking of the time we have to get things onto the capital budget, it usually takes us a while, but this is something that I think is very important for our community. So thank you for bringing it forward.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further questions from council from our presenter, Ms. Cuthbert? Seeing none. Thank you, Ms. Cuthbert, for your presentation. As a member of council, linked to the recommendation, report be received as information. Councillor McCook, Kat?
I move that the June 27, 2023 Adaptive Programming Opportunities in Beaumont report be received as information.
Thank you, Councillor. Discussion on the motion from members of council. Seeing none, council, I'll ask you to vote on the motion before you. And that passes unanimously 6-0. Thank you, Ms. Cuthbert. Appreciate your presentation and your time this evening. Thank you. Next on our agenda is 6.2, mitigating nuisance on medical cannabis growing. Ms. Darget, I believe you are presenting. Are you sitting at your chair? Which is fine. Yeah, I'll get the mic on for you. I think that's on.
Great,
Yeah,
thank you.
you're ready to go whenever you're ready, Ms. Darget.
I'll just wait for the presentation.
No problem.
Okay. There we go. Okay. Good evening. I'm Joanne Dargy, Manager of Legal and Intergovernmental Relations, and I'm here with Alicia Ingram, Senior Development Planner, to present for Council's consideration land use bylaw options intended to mitigate nuisances associated with medical cannabis production. I'm going to start with some history and background on the Cannabis Act and their federal licensing regime associated with medical cannabis. My intention with that is not to get into a social studies lecture for you, but rather to provide relevant information to set the stage and provide an understanding of some of the challenges and opportunities faced by municipalities across Canada and not just in Beaumont. In October of 2022, administration had presented to council regulations under the Community Standards Bylaw intended to control odors and other nuisances associated with cannabis production. Council adopted those provisions as part of the Community Standards Bylaw and also requested administration to prepare a report on options to amend the land use bylaw to mitigate the nuisances related to medical cannabis growing. With the legalization of cannabis in 2018, the federal government set minimum national standards for the possession and production of cannabis. It's helpful to understand the differences in the ability for individuals to grow cannabis in Canada. Adults growing cannabis for non-medical purposes are permitted to grow up to a maximum of 4 cannabis plants per household, not per person. It's not illegal to share cannabis grown for non-medical purposes with adults of legal age. However, it is illegal to sell non-medical cannabis unless it's licensed by Health Canada. Individuals who require cannabis for medical purposes can register with Health Canada to grow more than 4 plants. These individuals can grow cannabis as a registered patient or as a designated person to grow for someone else. They are prohibited from distributing or otherwise sharing any cannabis grown under a medical certificate. Under the federal registration certificate regime, the certificate will allow individuals to grow cannabis, again, for their own use or for designated persons. The certificate will designate an address where the production can occur. Certificate holders must comply with production limits, maximum plant and possession limits. And the number of plants that they are permitted to grow is based on a medical requirement. So they have to provide a medical certificate, which indicates the number of grams that they are required or need to grow, need for their medical condition. The number of grams then dictates the number of plants that they are entitled to grow, and the number of plants can range from 49 to 487 cannabis plants per certificate. So an individual can hold a certificate. They can also be hold a certificate as a designated person and grow for someone else. And this scale of production, though, if you're looking at 487 cannabis plants, that scale of production can lead to nuisance concerns for the community and potentially create health and environmental risks not typical of residential uses. These statistics are on Health Canada's website, and they're intended to provide open data for people to understand how many medical licenses have been issued, and it is broken down by province. So as of December of 2022, there are just under 1,600 active personal or designated production registrations. The average number of grams per day issued under a certificate is 20.7 grams per day. In order to produce this number of grams, according to the online calculator on Health Canada's website, that equates to 103 indoor plants or 40 outdoor plants, or a combination of 77 indoor plants and 20 outdoor plants. So that's one certificate for 20.7 grams of cannabis per day. Health Canada recommends that license holders check with provincial and local authorities to ensure compliance with those authorities. However, the issuance of a federal license is not dependent on compliance at the provincial or local level. Health Canada does not share information about the addresses where licenses are issued, and they do not require that licensees notify local officials about their certificate. This creates many issues for municipalities. Organizations such as FCM, Alberta Munis, and RMA have adopted resolutions to advocate to Health Canada for changes to the Cannabis Act and the licensing regime to help municipalities better deal with the impacts experienced at the local level. Some of these efforts are requests to implement an oversight system to ensure certificate holders remain compliant with their certificate, require the installation of ventilation systems, make the issue of a certificate subject to obtaining a municipal bylaw compliance beforehand, and for municipalities to be given open and continuous access to information on all licensed sites of cannabis production within their boundaries. Unfortunately, none of these changes have been made by Health Canada. In September of 2022, Health Canada did launch a review of the Cannabis Act, and Beaumont submitted a response to the online questionnaire and highlighted the negative impacts associated with growing medical cannabis in private residences. As part of this report, administration did conduct an environmental scan of other municipalities to examine how others may have dealt with this in their land use bylaw. We found a lack of consistency and clarity in addressing medical cannabis in not only the region, but the province and across the country. The best we can determine is that some municipalities have lumped this with their commercial cannabis production uses, while others still remain silent on the issue. And we have had numerous discussions with external legal counsel on this matter, and they're not aware of any municipalities that are directly regulating this in Alberta. So we have consulted also with legal counsel on the options that will be presented to council. And I will now turn the presentation over to Alicia, who will provide more information on those options.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Darjay. So tonight I'm here to present the 4 different options that administration has prepared for council's consideration. These options range from option 1 being the least onerous to option 3 being the most regulated. Within this report, I'm going to be using terms such as permitted use and discretionary use. So I'd just like to provide you a definition of both. So a permitted use is a use that we as the development authority may approve an application as long as it complies with the land use bylaw. A discretionary use is a use that we as the development authority have the discretion to either approve or refuse, ensuring that it complies with the land use bylaw, as well as imposing additional conditions. This option also has an appeal period attached to it, and we do send notification to adjacent landowners. I'll jump right into option 1A. So this option is to allow medical cannabis production as a discretionary use in all land use districts. As a license holder, you would be required to apply for a development permit. Approval of the development permit would be at the discretion of the development authority. This approach allows the municipality to assess each application subject to the conditions specified within the land use bylaw and impose site-specific conditions to mitigate the nuisance of growing medical cannabis. As a discretionary use, adjacent landowners or those who feel that they wish they are affected have the ability to appeal the development permit. The important thing to note is that appeals are restricted to conditions imposed on the permit and not the approval of the use to grow medical cannabis. Option 1B. Allow medical cannabis production as a permitted use in all land use districts with specific requirements. This option also, all license holders would be required to apply for a development permit. Approval of the development permit would be granted subject to meeting all of the conditions within the land use bylaw. These conditions would be aimed at mitigating nuisance related to medical cannabis growing. Since this use is permitted, there would be no notification to adjacent landowners, and it's very limited grounds for appeal. Option 2, medical cannabis, allow medical cannabis production for personal use only as a permitted use in residential districts and restrict designated producers to other land use districts as a permitted use. All license holders would be required, again, to apply for a development permit, and they would be subject to conditions specified within the land use bylaw. Only one personal license is allowed to grow medical cannabis in a property located in a residential district. So this would reduce the number of licenses in a residential district. Any person granted a license as a designated producer would not be permitted to grow medical cannabis in a residential area, but would be required to relocate to another land use district, such as the business light industrial or potentially the agricultural district. Option 3, prohibit medical cannabis production in residential land use districts, but allow medical cannabis production as a permitted use in other land use districts. So with this option being the most regulated, all license holders would be prohibited by the city from growing medical cannabis in a residential area. Any individual found to be growing more than 4 plants for recreational use would be subject to enforcement provisions throughout the land use bylaw, and that would be such as fines or a stop order. Licensed medical cannabis producers would be permitted to locate to another designated land use district, such as the business light industrial or the agricultural district, and would be required to apply for a permit, subject to the conditions specified to the land use bylaw. So it is, administration recommends that council proceed with option 3. The scale of personal medical cannabis production can vary from having a few plants to a few hundred plants. This option is more compatible with land uses in a non-residential district due to the offsite impacts, such as strong odors and emanating from large-scale productions. It would minimize the impact. I will pass it now to Mrs. Darjay.
Thank you. And thank you, Alicia. So to conclude, there are some potential risks that administration has considered. Those risks are are best spoken with council in a closed session. So if there are questions to the confidential document that was provided to you, we will need to move into closed session regarding those. Any other questions? If you have questions about Alicia's presentation, those can be done in open session.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Darge. Is that concluding your presentation?
That concludes our presentation for now. Yeah.
Thank you. I have a quick question before I go to council for questions on the presentation. So with option 3, the last one you presented on the screen, that does still allow a person for medical purposes to grow 4 plants in their house, correct?
So anyone can grow 4 plants in their house. This would not regulate that. That's recreational cannabis. This is specific to medical cannabis that has a Health Canada license.
Right. Thank you. With that, open the floor to council for questions about the presentation. If we have to go into closed session, I'll ask you to hold those questions until the end, and then we'll move into closed session, answer any questions that require the closed session. So bit of a hybrid right now. So are there any questions from council on the presentation from administration at this point? Councilor McGough-Swain, Sam, you have the floor, followed by Councilor Van Newkirk, followed by Councilor Cook, and followed by Councilor Miller. Kathy, we'll get to you in a minute. Kathy, we'll get to you. Okay. Sam.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor, and really appreciate all the work to go into this report. Recognize that the federal government certainly hasn't helped out to provide the support that we're looking for. So I know you guys are trying to churn through this. I do have a few questions around the legal side, so we will get into a closed session. But I'll just speak on a couple of things beforehand. As always, when we look at this, I'm trying to figure out what problem we're trying to solve. And you know, Alicia, you alluded it. You know, that the nuisance factor, and we know of, you know, at least a couple of significantly nuisance properties that are impacting nearby residents. So just thanks for looking into this. I know council, you know, was a bit stuck in terms of how to help solve the challenge for a lot of these neighboring residents. So what's presented here looks very logical. The question I had, and I'm not sure if I understood it appropriately or properly. You'd mentioned, Ms. Dargy, about, you said no one's regulating this, no one else is, you did a scan and no one else is regulating this in Alberta. Is that right? So if we implemented option 3, the recommendation, we would be the first in Alberta to regulate the production of cannabis. Did I understand that right?
Thank you, Your Worship, through to Councillor Munkoff-Swain. From the information through our external legal counsel and the scan that we did, we couldn't find any municipality in Alberta that was regulating it in this manner.
Yeah.
What we did find, and we weren't able to confirm, was that they were probably lumping it within their commercial cannabis production use and not singling out the medical cannabis.
Yeah,
personal
okay.
use.
And obviously being first opens you up to things. I'll just leave it at that. So, and we'll get into that in closed session. Then the second piece is just around the compliance side of things. And so you talked about, you know, some of the options. You talked about stop orders and fines, and that, but this is not through a criminal code, right? So, like we would not be able to rely on the RCMP or anyone like that to be able to enforce this. So, could you just first confirm my thoughts that this would be through our own municipal enforcement group? And I guess if we put that in, the stop orders and the fines and that sort of thing, like ultimately, we don't have that recourse going any further than that. This would be just within our borders. Is that right?
Sorry. Thank you. Through the mayor to Councillor Munkoff-Swain, that is correct. It would be a joint effort between the Planning Development Authority and municipal enforcement through the land use bylaw.
Okay, and then final question is just around. So if we put this in, right, we know there are folks who have the ability to produce this at the scale that you're talking about today. I'm just curious around the impact of, if we put this in, does that automatically mean that they are now in contravention of the bylaw? What's the grandfathering issue? So just curious around what that would mean for the existing ones who currently operate here. Could we then say, sorry, you're now in contravention, or do they get grandfathered in?
Thank you, Mayor, through to Councillor Munkoff Swain. I'll answer that in part. The rest of that needs to be answered in closed session. So according to the Municipal Government Act, because the city hasn't addressed it, so we haven't actually exempted anyone from obtaining a permit for this, but because we were silent on it, those individuals who are currently producing cannabis under a medical license would not be subject to the land use bylaw regulations unless something changed with their federal license. So either they increase the number of plants, they move to a different location, or change that license in some way.
Okay, and tell me if we need to jump out and to answer the follow-up, but you know, let's say we have problem house A that's currently has a license through the feds implementing this bylaw. What I'm hearing you say is that this change doesn't help address that. Am I understanding that properly?
The change strictly does not, the MGA strictly does not address this, the provision under the MGA. However, we can discuss an option in closed session.
I look forward to that. That's all for me, Mr. Mayor. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Van Newkirk, Steve, you have the floor, followed by Councillor Cook, followed by Councillor Miller. Steve?
Yeah, thank you to Councillor Munkoff Swain for the last pointed question. That's where one of the ones where I was going at. But if I just back up a second, the individuals can apply for Health Canada registration certificate. Do we have any metrics on how many of those exist and have been granted to individuals within Beaumont?
Thank you, Mayor. Through to Councillor Van Newkirk. So unfortunately, that is not the level of detail of information available from Health Canada. That is one of the items that the Federation of Municipalities had requested that Health Canada provide that information so that municipalities were aware of not only just the number of licenses in their community, but where they were located. Because if they do want us to put in some sort of regulatory regime for it here, it's really hard to enforce if we don't know where they're located either.
Yeah, exactly. And then secondarily to that, and I probably know the answer to this, but what oversight does Health Canada currently exercise to make sure that folks are following the terms of the licenses?
Based on the information that we have, there is very little oversight. However, they do have the ability to go in and do an inspection to ensure that license holders are fulfilling the conditions of their certificate. What we do know is that it's not done on a consistent basis. It's not done on a regular basis, likely done on a complaint basis.
Okay, that's all for now, Mayor.
Sorry, thank you, Councillor. Councillor McCook, Kat, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. Both councillors covered some of my questions. Following up on Councillor Van Newkirk's, so if there are nuisance complaints regarding odors and stuff currently, police, bylaw, whoever that potentially goes by the house to check. So can they check if they are legal license holders currently, or they don't even have access to that information?
Thank you, Mayor. Through to Councillor McCook. So we don't currently have access to that information. RCMP is able to obtain license information, but they have to specifically request that. The municipality could also do a freedom of information request to get data, but it would have to be continuous because those licenses continually change. So it would only be at a point in time. With residences that perhaps we're getting a complaint about, it would be a joint effort. And we would probably employ RCMP because we wouldn't know at that point whether it was a legal operation or an illegal operation.
Right.
So we would want to make sure the safety of our staff is taken care of as well.
Okay, thank you. So that's part of the lack of information sharing of approved locations.
Yes.
So even right now, if we're dealing with nuisance orders, we have no idea what they're kind of going to unless they're able to kind of go through those steps, which is obviously much later. Thank you. And then for option 1A, if neighbors or surrounding people said no to the discretionary use, would that then interfere with any of the federal allowances regarding growing medical cannabis?
Oh, me?
Oh, no. Sorry.
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay. I'll answer that. Thank you, Councilor McCook. So if under option 1A as a discretionary use, the development authority said no, refused the permit application, the applicant would have an opportunity to appeal to our subdivision development appeal board. That doesn't have any impact on their federal license. The federal license essentially overrides the municipal legislation regulations. So even if we said no, they'd still have that federal approval, and then there was more discussion we can have in closed session on that.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Miller, Ash, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation. It's pretty convoluted, lots of options. For me, I, like Councillor Monkoff-Swain said, like, what problem are we trying to solve? So I understand the medical cannabis production, that side of things, but for me, I'm trying to kind of go back to the recreational. So is that something that is currently, you know, at the beginning stages causing an odor, causing a nuisance? And is there further regulations to that we've explored, whether it be like proximity to windows or more ventilation, things like that, before we start tackling, you know, this monstrous amount of plants, like small peanuts growth of plants? Is that causing a nuisance? And did we look at those options to explore those further regulations just for the recreational use?
Thank you, Mayor. Through to Councillor Miller. So we did concentrate on medical cannabis because that is what's producing the volume of plants that is creating the nuisance odors. We haven't, as far as I know, received any complaints about anyone growing 4 plants in their house. There are provincial regulations around the 4 plants, and I do believe that you're not allowed to grow it in your window, that it needs to be out of sight, from the public roadway.
Okay, yeah, that I understand the medical portion of it. The recreation to me is like, I'm interested in those regulations and how do we know if they're being followed? You know, that's kind of where my head's at, but thank you very much for the explanation.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Barnhart. Kathy, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. My questions have mostly been answered by wait till the closed session. So that's where I'm going. And I'm just wondering, process-wise, what do we do with this report? Do you want a motion to go in to wait? Or as if we were to pass this without knowing that, I'd have a hard time voting.
Madam Clerk, my understanding is that we will now entertain a motion to go into closed session, have our discussion, answer questions, and then come out of closed session with a motion to proceed. Madam Clerk, can you advise? Your mic's on. Hang on. Just 1 second. There it goes.
Thank you, Mayor. That is correct. That would be the process. We can put up a motion on the screen to go into closed session. We'll reset into closed session. Council can ask those questions. Then we'll revert back to open session, and then council can pass a motion if they're ready on their options.
One of the options. Thank you.
Follow up on that.
Yes.
Given that there's a number of people here that may or not, maybe or not here for this particular item, is it possible to delay that closed session and make the decision at the end of the meeting rather than at this point? Because I know that some of the people are here for other reports as well.
I appreciate that, but we're on this topic now. I prefer to go into closed session on this topic and keep it fresh in mind with our presenter and keep on topic.
Mayor, if I may, we actually do have a number of residents who are here for both items.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
We do have a number of residents are here for both, waiting for both items. For item, the decision council has on 6.2 as well as 6.3.
So,
okay. I prefer to proceed to closed session on this particular topic. Is there a member of council willing to make the motion to move to closed session? Councillor Monkoff-Swain.
was waiting to see how long it would be before I put my button, but it looks short, so I'm okay to read this one. That I'll move that council move into closed session at 7:04 pursuant to the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, sections 23, 24, and 25.
Thank you, Councillor. Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, Council, please vote on the motion before you to move into closed session. And that carries unanimously 6-0. At this point, I'll ask all people who are in the gallery to please excuse us if you don't mind. We'll be in closed session and we'll let you know when we come out of closed session, when the door is open, and we'll proceed with our meeting accordingly. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. We are back live from our closed session. We are still on topic 6.2, mitigating nuisance on medical cannabis growing. The procedure is we come out of closed session, we're back in open session. We'll entertain a motion from council. We will discuss that motion and debate that motion and then vote on it. And then we'll take a short 5-minute break before we begin our next topic. I know you've been very patient, people in the audience, but we always take about a 5-minute break around 7:30, give or take a bit. So we'll do a very brisk 5-minute break in a few minutes from now. All right, is there a member of council willing to make a motion coming out of our closed session on mitigating nuisance on medical cannabis growing? Councillor Miller, Ashley, you have the floor.
Is it supposed to be up there?
Which motion are you going, which option?
3.
Option 3. Could you please place a motion, please, Madam Clerk, for option 3 on the screen for Councillor Miller to
Oh,
move?
I can just do that.
Yes.
I got it in front of me.
If you want to read off your screen, that's
Sure.
fine. It'll be on the public screen in a moment, whenever you're ready.
Sure, I make the motion for option 3 to prohibit medical cannabis production in residential land use districts, but allow medical cannabis production as a permitted use in other land use districts. That is not at all what that says. Okay, I'll move that option 3 as set out in the June 27th, 2023 report, bylaw 94419, land use bylaw, our zoning blueprint, mitigating nuisance related to medical cannabis, be approved, and that administration take the necessary steps to implement the option.
Thank you, Councillor. Do you wish to speak to your motion? You don't have to if you don't want to, but you can.
No, I'm good.
Good right now. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Could you please outline for council, should this motion pass, what are the next steps in the process of administration implementing this particular motion should it be passed? Madam Clerk, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. With this, if council chooses to move this motion, the process that will happen is administration will go back and we will prepare a possible amendment to the land use bylaw. After that amendment, it'll come back to council for first reading. And then after first read, and council will have the opportunity on whether or not they want to make any possible changes to the recommendations that are set out in option 3. After the first reading, a public hearing will be scheduled and be advertised as per the Municipal Government Act. And within that, any possible advertising or anything. And then it will come back for public hearing and in second and third reading.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. So there are a couple of steps to go through before this comes into effect. Thank you very much for clarifying that. Any questions from council or discussion from council on the motion before you? Seeing none, Councilor Miller, you have the opportunity to make a last comment if you wish to.
I don't think so. I think we've kind of touched on this at length before our closed session and during our closed session, so I'm pretty content.
Thank you, Councillor. Appreciate that. See no further discussion on the motion, council. I'll ask you to vote on the motion before you. And that carries unanimously, 6-0. Thank you. With that, as I mentioned, we will take a short 5-minute break and then we'll come back and begin our next topic of discussion this evening, which is 6.3 Council Committee Review Communication with Stakeholders. We are adjourned for approximately 5 minutes. I'll ask council and administration to be brief on the break, please, and we'll come back at 7:38. Thank you. Appreciate the brevity. Everybody, I wanted to say one thing before we went on our break. Congratulations, Ms. Dargy, Ms. Ingram, on a very, very good report on the cannabis situation. A very difficult report to write, but it's very well done and gave council good information to make a well-informed decision. So let's move on to the next part of our discussion this evening, which is under new business item 6.4 or 6.3, Council Committee Review Communication with Stakeholders. Ms. Bujaya, I believe you'll be presenting this evening, and you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. So I am Sandy Bujaya with Legal and Legislative Services, and I'm here to present this report to you. As council is already aware, we've been working on the review of council committees, and that started earlier this year. As part of that review, administration presented 9 recommendations aimed at improving the city's current approach to council committees at the May 23rd council meeting. At that time, council approved recommendations 2 through 9 and directed administration to conduct additional engagement with the Community Events Committee and the Beaumont Arts Council regarding recommendation 1. That recommendation number 1, would have seen both those committees discontinued at the end of the current calendar year and see their respective mandates amalgamated with existing council committees, with the Recreation, Parks and Culture Committee, which in turn would have meant that the entire bylaw, the mandate, the structure of that committee would have to be revised and refreshed to reflect the new roles and responsibilities. So in accordance with council direction, administration met with both committees on June 5th to share the recommendation and invite their feedback. The report that you have in your council agenda package today has a summary of the feedback that we received from both committees. I'm not going to go over all the feedback in length, but I'll just sort of highlight that we did share the summary with the committees to verify that we captured the feedback accurately. And overall, while the Community Events Committee had some concerns with the approach, overall, they supported the approach and saw the logic and the rationale for the direction. The Beaumont Arts Council appreciated the opportunity for having input, but strongly disagreed with the general approach. And they've also come here today to take part in open forum and to share their perspective. Administration did appreciate having the additional feedback from the committee members and acknowledges the important work that these committees do. All of council's committees provide a lot of time, expertise, dedication, and enthusiasm to cities' projects and initiatives. Administration's recommendations address the legislative and governance risks, as well as the resource issues that we shared with council during the closed session report on May 23rd. And those recommendations are noted in the report. So they're broken down as potential motions in the report. However, should council not support those recommendations, you also asked us to provide you with other options. So there are a couple of other options on the table. One option would be to simply continue the Beaumont Arts Council as a council committee and simply refresh the bylaw. I'll just point out that right now the Beaumont Arts Council is not appropriately established under the MGA. It doesn't actually have a bylaw. It does have a terms of reference. So that would be a critical thing that we would just have to do as a matter of course. So we could just reestablish the committee appropriately by developing a bylaw, which would come to council for readings, discussion, approval, just part of the normal process. Or the other option that would also be available to council would be to direct administration to look at the option of delegating that work, that mandate to a not-for-profit organization within the city of Beaumont, and to do that through a funding agreement. So that would be a little more challenging and it would require definitely more time and work, but that's also an option. So we wanted to highlight that for council. The last thing that I'll highlight is that we have had to put some projects on hold until we can kind of sort out what direction council would like to take with the committees. And that's okay. But one of the significant projects that's on hold, aside from the progress on the review work of the council committees, is the grant review. So that project, we're just sort of in a holding pattern until we can get some clear direction on this matter. And then we can move forward with bringing the results of the grant review back to council. So that's really all I wanted to say, and I'll turn it over to council if there are any additional questions or comments that we're happy to help with.
Thank you, Ms. Bajaya. Appreciate the report and the verbal explanation of it thereafter. Council, we do have a motion coming from Councillor Barnard on this topic, so I will go to Council first for questions, clarifying questions on the report. Ms. Bajaya, then I'll go to Councillor Barnard for her motion be brought forward for Council to consider, debate, and vote on. Councilor Newkirk, Steve, you have the floor first.
Yeah, thank you. I would also bring forward a motion as well. So I don't know how we decide who goes first. My mic was lit up here and I'm ready to go.
Oh, okay. I didn't expect that. So as procedure wise, you were first off the tee, so I guess we will proceed accordingly. Steve, you have the floor.
Sounds good. So for myself, having been involved in the first committee review that created the Beaumont Arts Council. And, I sat on the Arts Council, was involved in the creation of the terms of reference. And I know that through subsequent conversation that the terms of reference need some updating and that the bylaw, a bylaw could be created to address the legislative and governance matters. So to that end, I would move that Council direct administration to prepare a new bylaw for the BAC that addresses the legislative and governance matters. The other option, number 1. So that's where my head is at right now. Thank you.
Okay. I think that is effectively very similar to the motion Councillor Barnhart had. So that makes things a little bit easier, less contentious, which is a good thing. So could we maybe have Councillor Van Nieuwkerk's motion on the screen? Can you take a moment to draft it so he's okay with it? Madam Clerk, you have a comment?
Thank you, Mayor. If Councillor Van Nieuwkerk wants to forward me that exact wording so I can have a look at it.
Okay, we'll take a moment and let that happen. I know Councillor Barnhart's motion is ready to go type-wise. That's okay. We'll let Steve take a moment to get that on the screen for us. And then Council will, I'll ask Councillor Van Nieuwkerk if there's any further questions on his motion before I go to Council for questions and discussion on the motion.
So
take your time, Steve.
Yeah, no problem. I just forwarded that over to the city clerk and it's the wording from option 1. So if that wording from option 1 requires any additional guidance, just please advise on that. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, so number 1 number 1 from other options in the report itself, correct?
Yeah.
That you're referring to?
Yeah, it says other options
Okay,
and then
those are words with
number
make
1.
sure it's okay from what your perspective is, then we'll have you speak to it, okay?
Yeah, thank you.
Perfect, no problem. Take your time, Madam Clerk.
Did you email me that, Councillor Van Nieuwkerk?
Your mic's on, Steve.
Oh, now I've got it.
Did it pop up? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And as the mayor said, take your time. And if there's another piece that needs to be considered to give further direction as to anything that might be required, I'm all ears. Thank
For
you.
sure. Yeah. I will just work this one right now.
While waiting for that motion to be put before us, I should mention point of order with only having 6 of us on council now. Just refresh council's memory that a tie vote means any motion is defeated. And it can't come back for at least 1 year unless there's some circumstance to bring back earlier than that. There's some words to do it, but should a motion not be passed, it can't come back for 1 year. Any future votes, not just tonight, any future votes until the vacancy on council is filled in the fall. So 3-3 means the vote is defeated. I don't get a second vote. I don't get a veto. You know, heard it. Some guys get that somewhere in the world, but not me. The Senate gets.
Thank you, Mayor.
Senate.
I am prepared with this motion. I did reword it a little bit. If Councillor Van Nuker is okay with that, I'll just pop it up on the screen and you can let me
Yep.
know if that
Yep.
captures.
Steve can review it and give his blessing on it, or he can tweak it if he needs to. Oh, your mic, Steve, it's on now.
Yes, I think the intent of that is captured here, the nuances of, you know, the legislative versus all legislative, I think aside, I believe that the intent is there. So I will move that administration prepare a new bylaw for the Beaumont Arts Council that addresses the legislative requirements and aligns the compliance with the requirements set out in the Municipal Government Act. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And point of clarification, Madam Clerk, my understanding from Steve's motion is that the Beaumont Arts Council will not terminate on December 31st of this year. It'll continue on under a new bylaw. That's correct?
That is correct, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilman Nicoll, do you wish to speak any further to your motion before I open the council for questions? You're good. Thank you. With that, council, any questions for the motion? Councillor Miller, followed by Councillor Barnhart. Ashley, you have the floor.
Perfect, thank you. Just for clarification, without reading the MGA in point form, can we just speak to what is going to be the difference between currently versus what's to come?
Ms. Bourget, please
Sure.
proceed.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Miller. So one of the main requirements is that the committee be established by bylaw. So that would be the first one. And then it would be dealing with the typical things that are expected of council committees to be held in public, unless there's matters that fall under the exemptions of FOIP, to have a process by which you give notice to the public when you're about to have a meeting and provide the agenda in advance, how the meetings are called, and there would be a little more structure. So we would have some reporting requirements to council included in the bylaw. We would try to set the expectations so that there's clarity for the council committee in terms of what is expected from council, from the committee. So I think this also was addressed in the comments shared by the chair of the committee today, sort of the idea of having regular report backs to council and things like that. That's not strictly an MGA requirement, but that's a good governance practice that we would, of course, include in the bylaw.
Perfect. Thank you, Sandy, for that clarification.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Barnhart. Kathy, you have the floor, followed by Councillor McGough-Swain. Kathy?
Thank you, Mayor. Just by way of process, I just have one question, but then I would like an opportunity when it circles back to speak to the motion, if that's okay. Sure. You don't want me to do that now. I assume you want to do questions first and.
Questions first and then.
Yeah. Okay. And just so you know, question to Ms. Bourget is around timelines. So what happens now with, I know the Arts Council has a number of things on the go. So does everything stop or does it keep going? And what do you expect the timeline to be so that meetings, et cetera, can be scheduled?
Through the mayor to Councillor Barnhart, thank you for the question. It's status quo for now. The current Beaumont Arts Council will just continue to operate as it's operating. We don't expect that they would stop everything until we provide the bylaw. My hope is to have the bylaws in front of council prior to the end of this year and make them effective for the beginning of the new year, just so we have a little bit of transition time. There are some pieces that administration is also responsible for in terms of supporting the committee. So we just have to make sure we have our ducks in a row. So this doesn't stop the Beaumont Arts Council right now. They're continuing with their mandate as is, situation normal. And then once the bylaw is passed, then administration would work with the council to make sure that they're able to comply with the requirements of the bylaw.
Thank you for that. One further, if I may, Ms. Pacheco, maybe you don't have the answer, but maybe someone else does. I know Ms. Manchur spends time with the Arts Council. I'm just wondering about what percentage of an FTE. Is there anyone have a guess on that in terms of, because that's really one of the major challenges of any group is having a staff person that can help them get things done. So I'm just wondering if you have an answer for that, or if we need that later.
Sure. I can't give you a precise answer to that question, but I can speak in general terms just based on my experience working with council committees. So presently, right now, Recreation Department supports 4 committees. We would be reducing to 3, so that helps, provided that council's still supportive of discontinuing the Community Events Committee. In terms of the amount of time from an FTE, I think with 3 committees, if the same staff member were supporting 3 committees, you're looking at about 50% of their time if you had 3 committees with 1 staff member as the main support liaison for all 3.
Okay.
That's a rough estimate, just sort
About a
of.
0.5 FTE.
Yeah.
Okay. I have another comment to make, but it's not about the Arts Council. It's about the Civic Events Committee.
Yeah.
Do you want to deal with that separately? Yeah. There's a lot in this, so yes.
Floor.
Yeah, I don't have any clarifying questions.
Okay.
So if you wanted to jump into the motion, I know you said you wanted to as well. So if you, unless like no one else lit up, so
We'll do the vote on this one then.
did you want to speak to the motion first and then I
Yeah,
can,
don't
and then I
speak to
can
this.
come back?
You speak to this motion. Councillor Barnhart, you have the floor again.
Thank you very much. Great minds think alike. Thank you, Councillor Van der Kirk. It's exactly the wording that I would have been putting forward. So I appreciate that. It's been tabled, and the vision of the Arts Council is something that I still support wholeheartedly. I do believe the current setup and structure had some issues and has some issues, and I believe if we take the time to do the bylaw again in a more complete and following the MGA, we'll get to a place where we want to be. I do think it takes time. I don't think we've given it enough time yet. So to cancel it would not have been a good idea in my mind. I think the only other thing I would say is that the terms of reference were, at the time, they seemed to be okay for us, but I think at this point we've grown, and we could see by the number of applications that have come in for grants and for input that the city of Beaumont is growing very quickly, and we need to make sure that we have this right. So not only to protect the members and the volunteers on the Arts Council and the members of the artistic community, but also all of the citizens of Beaumont, so that we make sure we have it right. So I'm totally in support of this coming back to us, and I'd be pleased to vote in favor of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Sorry, Sam, are you speaking to this motion? Please proceed, Sam. You have the floor.
Thank you. And again, just recognize Jeremy for coming in and the support from the group since this was brought forward, and the feedback that we've all had. And good question around staffing, and that's kind of where I want to go. Personally, I'll say I was a little frustrated at how the BAC started and got going. And since this has come out, I've done a lot of reflecting on that. And one of the things that I look back to is when we developed the terms of reference, one of the key things that was put in front of us from the BAC and the other arts groups was to have a dedicated resource here in Beaumont, right? Dedicated to the arts. So as I reflect on that, I can't help but think that, despite all the good work that's been done and Joanna's amazing and does, 200% of her time somehow across multiple things. I can't help but think that, this is probably a reflection more on council for not providing the support that this needs. And so, like where the motion is going here, can read the room. I think that, trying to shut this down, or more politely say sunset this, I think it goes the opposite of what this council was really trying to do. And I recognize for administration that the amount of challenges that you guys have had to try to work through this with the lack of resourcing that's there. So I really think that council, instead of and really instead of, this is the time for, providing more support rather than less, I would say, and I think a few folks have spoken to that. So for me, what I would, I'm supporting the motion here, and I will be supporting the motion today, and recognize it needs to clean up to meet the MGA and all that sort of stuff. But I'd also like to see an option for us at budget time to see if for a dedicated person to speak and work directly with the arts community. We couldn't quite answer the numbers of FTEs and all that sort of stuff, and we won't put people on the spot again, but I think it's fair to say that there's significantly more staff dedicated to recreation than arts here, and I think with an updated bylaw, terms of reference, etc., and dedicated resources, I think we could really work through this. So I'm not trying to jump ahead and discuss a budget item, but I would like to figure out a mechanism for a recommendation for administration to bring back as part of the budget process an option for council to consider then. So I'll defer to the clerk, on how we want to procedurally do that, whether it's an amendment or whether it's a second motion to direct administration to bring that type of position back. But generally, yeah, I acknowledge the work that administration has done, that the volunteer group has done. I don't think me as council have provided enough support to really push it forward. So a lot of momentum, and now's the time to help. So yeah, I'll defer to administration on how we could potentially look to do that. If you need a motion, if me sharing that is enough, do we need thumb wags? How do you want to handle that? I just want to make sure that there is something in budget for us to consider it. There is a one-pager that we can look at.
Yep. Thank you, Councillor. Appreciate that. Having said that, I will simply say that I will support this motion. I think it's a good compromise, the situation, and we'll look forward to the new bylaw to look after the Beaumont Arts Council going forward. So Councilman Newkirk, it is your motion. You have the final say before I call for the vote.
Sorry, can I just, I just didn't get clarification because I didn't really ask my question specifically. So let me ask my question specifically to administration. Do I need to make an additional motion to direct administration to bring back a one-pager as part of budget? Can we add on as a friendly amendment? How can we have that? Yeah.
Madam Clerk, hang on. Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Mayor. I would suggest that we have it as a separate motion. We haven't voted on this first motion if we're going to be proceeding yet with regards to this. It sounds like that's the direction council is going, but I would pass this motion and then I would do an alternate motion that would have that, which I'm just working on.
Thank you.
Councilman Newkirk, Steve?
Yeah, thank you. If there was 3 more lines to include, we could have done that, but it is cleaner with 2 motions. I do agree, and I support the direction that Councillor Monkoff-Swain is going there. Just a closing remark ahead of the vote. For tonight, we've heard from the current board chair of the BAC, and thank you for coming in. That the BAC wasn't in favor of sunsetting, and we saw a show of support from members from those members in council chambers tonight. And as pointed out by Councillor McCook, we have volunteers fighting to volunteer, and it's great to see. And this motion considers that desires from members, and also supporting this council committee with a newly crafted bylaw really sets the BAC up for success in the future. So, that's where my head's at. And obviously I support the motion because I made it. And thanks for the closing comment opportunity, Mayor.
No problem, Councillor. Appreciate that. With that, Council, seeing no further comments, I'll ask Council to vote on the motion before you. 1 second, get the start button here. There we go. Please vote. That carries unanimously, 6-0. Thank you, Councilman Newkirk. At this point, are we going to do something? Are you going to draft something, Sam, to do later on in the meeting? We can bring it back later on. Thank you. We'll move on to the next part of our discussion this evening is 6.5 healthcare services in Beaumont update. Sorry. Oh, hang on a second. Yeah, I forgot about that. Had checked off my notes here. So yes, I apologize, council. I got ahead of myself there just a little bit. Next in our balance of our report now is to deal with the balance of the report with respect to the Community Events Committee. So with that, Councillor Warner, do you have something you wanted to, a question you wanted to raise?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. It's kind of sad to me to see this committee go because it's been certainly very strategic and very helpful in our community in getting a lot of events done. But I think it was, the writing was on the, handwriting was on the wall. At their last meeting, when it was presented to them, they couldn't make quorum. So part of the problem is that there's not enough, well, I shouldn't say there's not enough work to do, but I think the work, my assessment of it, the work has kind of grown to a point where the staff are doing it because it's so large. We have so many people. It's very difficult for volunteers to do that on the side of their desk, so to speak, while they have other jobs. So I think what is happening here is that they've grown bigger and the events have gotten bigger. And so while I find it sad, I do think it does need to sunset. One of the things I'd like to, and I don't know if this requires a motion or not, but I do think the members of all of the committees that we have, but especially the Community Events Committee right now, should be thanked publicly and appreciated, and make sure this isn't something that they feel was a slight, on them, because they certainly have given it their all, the ones that have been attending. I think at least 4 of them have been regular attenders, and of course, Councillor McCook has been there. But I just would like to see them tangibly thanked somehow, either publicly recognized, and maybe there's a small token of appreciation, which we don't have to decide that tonight. But I really do think that they deserve a pat on the back, and I don't want them to think in any way this is their fault, because it's not.
No.
I think it's just, it's gotten too big for them.
Well, I think point taken. I think we definitely do something with our communications staff to do an appropriate public thank you for those committee members. Should this motion go forward, assuming it does. If it doesn't go forward, then it won't matter. In a sense of a thank you thing. You know what I mean by that. So, Madam Clerk, then I'll go to Councillor McCook.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to add to Councillor Barnhart's comment. We do have a council policy that does actually address thanking members of our council committees for their dedication and things. And with regards to this being the sunset, should this motion, these motions go through, then we would definitely work with communications to bring that forward in the messaging.
Thank you. Councillor McCook. Kat, you have the floor.
Thank you. Yeah, I echo Councillor Barnhart's remarks. I think that the committee did a lot of great work, and there's as presented in the report, there's a lot of things that arose from the committee, which were then came out in the events, which proved to be beneficial. However, I agree. I think that time commitments and everything like that, as well, to get these community events going were proving to be quite strenuous. The Community Events Committee did bring up a good point, though, in that sometimes when a committee's mandate is too large, they may require subcommittees. And even within the community events, there were some subcommittees to deal with each specific event as well, which created a lot of meetings and whatnot. How will we navigate that once it's kind of rolled into the Parks and Rec?
Ms. Mujia.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Councillor McCook, that's a valid question, and I've certainly been having quite a few conversations with my friends in recreations about some of the options that might be available to us. I would really be looking for direction from the folks over in recommendation on how best to restructure the committee. I think one of the nice things that council has already done, when you pass the new council committee bylaws, there's a lot more clarity around what's expected from the committees, the number of meetings, the membership will change. It'll just make the committee more robust. And I think the communication between council and the committees will be under the new model as well. Council has already directed administration to work on a mandate process. So I think that will help narrow the focus for each of the committees. It can be very daunting when you're a committee member and you have this large scope. Where do you start? So
Mhm.
by having an annual plan, by having more focused mandates, more communication with council, I think we can work together to help navigate some of those challenges and just shift the focus to where it needs to be in a particular year.
Okay, thank you. And I think we already kind of covered this, but just to refresh my memory, um, there will potentially be an opportunity for members from the community events to apply to be on.
100%, yes. Part of the previous recommendations that council approved was a communications to the committees, to all the impacted committees, to let them know why council is making the changes, what the changes are, and what does that mean for them, as well as to acknowledge the tremendous support and work and contributions already made. So I think that that message has been well received and understood. So we're just finalizing the decisions and then we'll start executing on those things.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Council. Give me 1 second here. Oh, hey, having said that, no other further comments for questions to go forward. So I will ask Madam Clerk to put the motions up on the screen. I can make the motion on behalf of council. And we can debate the motion and move forward on this topic. I'll move that the Community Events Committee be discontinued effective December 31st, 2023, and that the Recreation, Parks and Culture Advisory Committee bylaw be revised so the committee name, mandate, and terms of reference include providing strategic advice on community events, and that the council policy C38, development and practice of artistic and cultural expression policy, be amended to align with the changes related to the Beaumont Arts Council. Discussion on the motion from any members of council? Seeing none, I have no comments to make other than what's been discussed already in the report. Just a point of clarification, Madam Clerk, the last one is correct, right? It talks about Beaumont Arts Council. Just to clarify for myself more than anybody else, perhaps.
Thank you, Mayor. I will speak to this, but if Ms. Bougea wants to add to it, regardless of us coming forward with a new bylaw, we still need to align the bylaw and the council policy together. So there would be amendments coming to this council policy.
Right, that's what I thought. Ms. Bougea, do you wish to make an additional comment?
Madam Clerk was 100% correct. They would be consequential amendments so that the two documents work together.
Perfect, thank you. Our council, seeing no further questions or comments on the motion, I have no further closing comments on the motion. So council, I will now call for the vote on the motion before you on the screen. And that carries unanimously, 6-0. Thank you, council. That concludes this section of our business item on 6.3. Oh, sorry, Sam, is this the motion from before?
Yeah, we're just
Okay, I thought
making
we
it
do it at the
hard.
end of the meeting, but it's okay, we'll do it now if you want.
No, we're just making it hard for you,
Sure,
then, mate.
we'll do it now then.
So I'll move and thank you again to our wonderful Ledge Services group for dealing with us today and being ready and preparing and adjusting. So I will move that administration prepare a report on options to provide additional resourcing dedicated for the arts as part of the upcoming budget 2024 process.
Please speak to your motion.
I won't go into detail. I think we all get the gist of what we're looking for here. This doesn't mean that we are going to approve by voting yes, doesn't mean you approve additional spending. By voting yes means admin's going to bring back a one-pager on what that would look like, or one-pager-ish on what that would look like. And we'll need to assess that with all the other budget pressures that we have. So I just wanted to make sure we have the discussion. And so this was an appropriate time to bring that forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Discussion on the motion or any questions for the mover? Seeing none, I'm assuming you have no terminating comments. Okay, council, with that, no further discussion. Please vote on the motion before you now. The motion carries unanimously. Thank you, council. All right, we can now move on to our next part of our meeting, which is now 6.5, healthcare services and the Beaumont update. Ms. Cassandra, I believe you'll be presenting. You should come to the front if you can, if you want to. Sure. Let me find a mic for you. There you go. When you're ready, please begin. Oh, Well, touching the mics. Okay, now you go. Thanks so much.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I am Cassandra Squires, Manager of Strategic Initiatives. Thank you for having me at today's council meeting to talk about healthcare services in Beaumont. I'll also note that this is my first time since joining the City of Beaumont to speak with you today, so I'm looking forward to the discussion. As administration, we took the opportunity to write this report to explain a little bit about our community's history related to healthcare, as well as the challenges we face and what steps administration is taking to ensure residents have access to health-related services. Today, I'll take a few moments to summarize this report, but I'll also add a bit of additional context. Since writing this report, I've had the pleasure, along with many others from our team, to meet with representatives from Alberta Health Services, Edmonton Health City, the Leduc Beaumont Devon Primary Care Network, as well as a local physician. We know healthcare is a very nuanced, but also a very siloed industry. And so I'm grateful for the time with these representatives to build relationships, but also to hear their perspective on the challenges and solutions we're working towards. So with that, I will begin. For many years, Beaumont has benefited from having fairly good access to primary care services given our population size. In the Alberta Community Health Survey done by Alberta Health between 2014 and 2020, 88.8% of Beaumont residents responded that they had a family physician. Of course, since 2014, the population of this community has grown substantially and continues to grow, which we expect to triple by 2044. As well, we've seen a global pandemic in which we've heard a lot about family physicians choosing to retire early, or are experiencing pandemic burnout. And so while we wait to see the data from 2021, 2022, which is not available yet, we can safely assume that 88.8% is probably no longer an accurate figure. The Canadian Medical Association has also commented on the administrative burden and the licensing of doctors trained internationally. We also heard throughout our meetings that younger physicians graduating medical school are less interested in practicing family medicine and are instead choosing to specialize. And those residents who have chosen to practice family medicine are less and less likely to want to stay in one clinic or in one community and are often instead choosing to locum. These are all having dramatic impacts on our family physician availability. Beaumont benefits from two primary care networks, the Leduc Beaumont Devon PCN and the Edmonton Southside PCN. Family physicians in our community are members of either, and we know that many residents also travel into South Edmonton, Leduc, Sherwood Park, or other communities to see a physician, meaning they would probably benefit from other PCNs as well. Leduc Beaumont Devon's PCN supports 68 family physicians and 1 nurse practitioner who work across 17 clinics. And Edmonton Southside has more than 300 family doctors in over 100 member clinics. I have learned since writing this report that the typical panel or number of patients a physician sees is about 1,000 people. With the exception of some advocacy efforts in 2017 on mental health supports, as well as the efforts on emergency medical services, which you all know very well, Beaumont has not actively worked to improve primary care services in our community over the years. However, with our projected growth and the current challenges in primary care across Canada, administration has mapped out steps to further support this community, which we'll get to near the end of this presentation. I'd like to specifically first speak to the City of Cold Lake's initiative for a municipally owned medical clinic, which was passed by their council on February 14th, 2023. Cold Lake identified several challenges they faced in attracting physicians in their business plan, including financial supports, government priorities, the priorities of legislative governing bodies, and obstruction by existing family physicians in their community. It is also in a northern rural Alberta area, which compounds the factors that they've identified. The municipality has chosen to purchase an existing family medicine clinic, keeping the current physicians on staff with the intention that they will recruit more physicians to that clinic. Given what we know about the family physician climate in Canada, it is unclear whether they will be more successful in their endeavors with this new clinic. It is also interesting to point out that in the same community health survey that I referenced earlier, nearly 77% of Cold Lake residents responded that they had a family doctor. As well, there are over 1,700 military members that work at the Canadian Armed Forces base in Cold Lake. these members are required to use healthcare services provided by the Department of National Defense and would not be patients of civilian healthcare. Provided that majority of these members live in or near Cold Lake, this could represent a significant number of people not requiring public healthcare services. Given all of these factors, it isn't immediately clear whether their investment of taxpayer dollars is going to result in a noticeable impact in health-related services for their residents. Healthcare is a multifaceted issue. That's why administration is taking several approaches to improve services, beginning with the community needs assessment this council has spoke about previously. Our request for proposals is looking for a proponent to answer several questions, including what are the ways people want to access healthcare in our community? How do they currently access health services? What assets and gaps exist in our current services? And based on our growth, what will we need in the next 10 years and in the next 20 years? Of course, there are more questions than that. The intention of this community needs assessment is to receive tangible data, evidence, and recommendations that we can consider to determine what the best course of action is to improve access to health-related services in the community. We are also excited that Alberta Health Services has offered to lend their expertise on this project from start to finish. And I can tell you that the meetings we've had with their population health needs team thus far have been invaluable. As well, administration has ramped up engagement with several other health industry partners, including Covenant Health at Edmonton Health City and local frontline staff. We are building strong relationships and connections and exploring creative and innovative solutions that will complement traditional healthcare services. We believe these efforts will help administration and council make evidence-informed decisions on actions that will tangibly benefit the residents that live in our community. Thank you. That concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Your first presentation went very, very well. Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
very well report, very good report too as well. Thank you very much for that. So with that, council, open any questions councillors may have of our presenter on the topic. Councillor Miller, Ashley, you have the.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I thought it was very thorough, easy to understand. I don't know if I have question. I mean, you laid everything out quite easily for us. More so comments. I guess question is, when you said you met with an AHS liaison, when did that actually occur?
Please.
Through the mayor to Councillor Miller. I have been meeting with Alberta Health Services over the past several weeks. I've actually had 2 meetings with them this week to discuss the request for a proposal, but I believe I would say that those conversations started about a month ago.
Sorry,
about a month ago.
About a month ago. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I'll let some of the other councillors weigh in here, but I have lots going on, more comments. Let's just see what they have to say.
No, I'll
Thank you.
circle back to you a bit later.
Sure,
then. Sure.
yeah.
Councillor McCoy-Swain, followed by Councillor McCook. Sam?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, excellent presentation and appreciate the report, the detail that's gone into the background for us there. I used the word nuance tonight when it comes to healthcare, particularly in our role as municipalities versus provincial, and I think you articulated that extremely well. You also talked about, building what we've been doing, building the strong relationships and connections. And when I say we, I mean you and the team. And just want to recognize, that this doesn't happen overnight, right? Like you sit up here and, the amount of comments that we got, particularly during the election around the need for a healthcare, for improved healthcare, the recognition from us is that, you can't just say, okay, we'll go and get it then, right? And so everything that you're doing to build those relationships is super important for when we are ready to move forward with whatever that looks like. And then the other comment you touched on, which really struck to me, is really making an evidence-based decision, right? I know nothing about healthcare. In my mind, I think, hey, it'd be great if we had a building that had all these folks come in and doctors and whatever. Great. But what you guys are building, thankfully, is that it's you, not me. It is going to take a look at all those options are, and that may be the right option, but having that evidence base is crucial for me. the big thing, as I think almost everyone, if not everyone, spoke about this during the campaign to get here is we always got the question, what are you doing, right? And my previous answer was a bit of a cop out. I'd say, it's the province, right? And that clearly no longer stood enough for what we're doing. And so it's obviously in our strategic plan, the needs assessment that's going on, which I'll dive into here quickly, is that first step. So, I think I'm happy now that we can say we're making tangible steps and progress to looking at how we can improve that. So, long-winded way of saying thank you for you, and I know you're working with multiple folks across the board. On the needs assessment itself, I just want to make sure I'm lining up timeline, and I think you guys specifically wrote this language in here to alleviate some of the concerns around timing. So going out for end of July, selecting the proposal, taking 6 months to complete. But then you added a nice little sentence which made me happy in there that said you're working towards some short-term solutions or preliminary report for budget, right? What I just wanted to pick that apart a little bit. We put it in the last budget, and recognize it takes a lot of time to get up and all that sort of stuff, but we don't want to miss another budget cycle, right? Because we don't have any budgets, this council don't have any left. So I just wanted to understand, when you talk about preliminary report, like, how much do you think is going to be in there? And that's an open-ended question, but are we going to be in a position to be able to make some strategic decisions moving forward at this budget? Or are we really going to need to wait till we get all those numbers? How do you see that looking?
Thank you, through the mayor, to Councillor Monkoff Swain. I guess what I would say is that we had this opportunity through Alberta Health Services. We were meeting with them about an RFP that we had already decided to go out with. And what I really gleaned from their conversation, you had mentioned in your remarks that we're not healthcare experts, and I'll admit that neither am I. And so in that conversation, when they showed interest from their population health needs team to support us in this and to really lend their expertise on how they do this.
Yeah, sure.
Oh, hang on. I had the wrong mic there. Sorry. There we are.
That's okay. It became, I think, really important to, we have delayed a little bit putting out the request for proposals so that we could benefit from their expertise. And so far they've been incredible and proactive in sharing information with us. And so I'll admit to you that we are putting out the request for proposals a little bit later than I think all of our team would have hoped. What I'm hoping from any successful proponent that is selected is that they will be mindful of our budget conversations that will be happening in October and provide at least preliminary short-term recommendations that we can take action on now, and then likely larger strategic items that would be coming in the next budget cycle. It's also very possible that there are items that are recommended to us that maybe do not require financial impacts to the municipality. Examples that I would give is us being able to work with private organizations in our community that are building some of these new neighborhoods and being able to be relationship builders. I think that's a really interesting role that municipalities can play in the healthcare conversation. Outside of leaving things to the province, we have feet on the ground and relationships where we can make connections. And so it's very possible that we have recommendations that are not purely budget related.
Yeah, no, and you hit the nail on the head, or everything I was looking to hear there was, as you're going through whoever the successful proponent is, making sure they're aware of our budget process, and anything that we can squeeze into that, we appreciate it. We don't want to rush it, but I'm sure there's no finance folks in the room here, so we can always do an off-cycle kind of discussion if we really needed to, right, Mike? So yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you. The last thing here is just not a question, but just a nod. I know that as a group, administration has really put a strong effort into working with some of our Indigenous neighbours and some cultural program potentially, and looking at options there around some Indigenous health and traditional healthcare through an Indigenous lens. So just keep up the good work there. I know that folks are recognizing Beaumont as, reaching out to them as opposed to, traditionally hasn't been the case. So looking forward to seeing where any of those sort of leads go. But yeah, great report and looking forward to getting more information and budget time. So thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor McCook, followed by Councillor Barnhart. Kat? Oh, hang on. Here you go.
Thank you, Mayor. Not much more for me to say. I think Councillor Munkoff-Swain kind of hit all the points. Great report for sure. I agree with everything on it as well. And I think the health needs assessment will be prudent for us to see exactly what the needs are prior to us diving into anything. So appreciate all of it. And I look forward to seeing what comes next. Thank you.
Thanks, Kat. Councillor Barnhart. Kathy?
Thank you very much. And this seems like there's a theme here. Definitely, you did hit all of the points that we were expecting, I believe. When we developed our strategic plan, advocacy, data, helping citizens understand, I mean, all of that, building partnerships is exactly what we felt at the time we needed. And I really do think going in the direction of a needs assessment, a community needs assessment, will give us the data and help us to confirm whether we invest more heavily on behalf of our citizens or whether we, again, turn to the province who, no, I won't go there right now. But in terms of where we should be going, I think we have to look at what we can afford and where we can go in the future. But definitely healthcare is right up there with the needs that we are hearing from our citizens. So I do appreciate it. And I'm going to say your name, Ms. Squires, because I want to remember who you are because I haven't seen you enough. But thank you very much, Ms. Squires.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Miller. Oh, you took your button away? Okay, no problem. Thanks, appreciate that. And just lastly, great report is, I'll be brief. Basically, I have spent a couple of times meeting with Minister Copping, former Minister of Health before the recent election. I'm not going to meeting with the new Minister of Health scheduled yet, but we'll have to talk about that and schedule our next meeting with them and Covenant Health and move things forward on the health assessment. So I won't spend any more time than that. It's already 8:30. So do appreciate you coming in. Great report. And with that information, the report will be received for information. Is there a member of council willing to move that report? That motion. Thank you, Councillor Barnhart. It's on the screen for us.
I move that the June 27, 2023 report, healthcare services in Beaumont update be received as information.
Thank you, Councillor. Discussion on the motion. I'm seeing none. So with that, Council, would you please vote on the motion before you? And that does pass unanimously. Thank you, Ms. Squires. Much appreciated. And great report. Thank you very much. Next on our agenda this evening is 6.6, motion following notice, advocacy for improved safety standards for midway rides. From Councilman Newkirk. I'll wait for it goes on the screen and Steve, you can make your motion. You're ready to go, Steve.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. There's more buttons flashing here. Thank you, Mayor. I'll move that by July 18th, 2023, administration in consultation with other municipalities in the region prepare a proposed emergent resolution to the Alberta Municipalities Association that calls on the provincial government to review and improve the current safety requirements related to midway rides in Alberta. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate that. Would you care to speak to your motion? Please
Yes,
proceed.
please. And I'll keep it brief for sure. But Council, tonight I'm asking for your support on this motion. Community safety is a top priority for myself, Council, and our city administration. Midway season is upon us in Alberta, and we have witnessed incidents in neighboring communities that have been extremely unfortunate for those involved. In working with legislative services to determine an effective path that would bring the issue of improving safety requirements related to midway rides in Alberta forward in a timely manner, this motion made the most sense. I look forward to seeing this topic move forward in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Appreciate your explanation of your motion. Any questions from members of council for the motion before you? Councilor McGough-Swain, Sam?
Yeah, so first, thanks for bringing it forward. I'm just curious if you've had discussions with other municipalities in the area who have had challenges with this. Do we know if anyone else is thinking about this?
Oh, Sorry, Steve, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Monkoff Swain. I have had informal discussions with a couple of members from neighboring a couple of council members from neighboring municipalities where there have been concerns. At that point, a couple of weeks ago, they were unsure if they were bringing anything forward. So in absence of that, I thought it might be timely to bring something forward so that we could still qualify as an emergent resolution. So this is me trying. If someone else if another municipality wants to take the lead, give her, but in absence of that, perhaps this is something that we can get behind a microphone and talk about.
Yeah, and which is why I liked in the language where it says in consultation with other municipalities in the region.
That's right.
Yeah, I appreciate you putting
It may be determined that we're not the best leader
Yeah.
and someone else might be, and I can stand up and second, or however that works.
Yeah, we don't need to push, like if someone else is doing it, yeah. So I'm good with that. And then my only other question to put you on the spot is if this passes, I assume that you'll be the one speaking to this at AUMA?
You were brave before and I'll be brave next time. So yes, I would.
That's on the record. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks very much. Any other questions from members of council on the motion? I have no question. I'm in favor of the motion. So Steve, any final comments before I call for the vote? You're good? All right, council, I will call for the vote on the motion before you. And that carries unanimously, 6-0. Thank you, council. Next on our agenda is we have councilor inquiries, reports, and responses. Any councilor inquiries this evening? Councilman Newkirk, Steve?
Yeah, thank you. Just wish to speak briefly to my inquiry on the curb extensions. There has been a fair amount of community conversation around the curb pilot project on 56A. And, I've been watching and listening, and I have noted that administration has modified the locations a little bit, and they've put some pylons and stuff up along the way, and I do recognize it is a pilot project. So my goal as residents reach out will be to direct them to the service portal with their comments, questions, and concerns. And that's what I'm going to continue to do. So, this councilor inquiry satisfied the purpose and highlighted and answered the things that I asked for, and the rest I'll push forward into that portal. So that's my comment, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, councilor. Appreciate that. Any new councilor inquiries this evening? Seeing none, move. Oh, Councilor Miller, Ashley.
Yeah, I just, my inquiry is please provide information. Do I have to read this?
Yes, please.
Please provide information on the process for assessing priority levels for sidewalk repairs and an update on the current state of the city's sidewalks.
Thank you. Any further councilor inquiries before I move on to the CO update? Seeing none, CO Schwartz, your update, please.
Yes, thank you very much. I will be brief. We got a number of items here. Of course, Beaumont Days was held May 26th to the 28th, and it was a great success. We estimated over 7,000 people took in the activities over the weekend. The effort that goes into multi-day events is tremendous, and we'd like to recognize the contributions of all the staff and volunteers that came together to make this event possible. A little bit of numbers for you, and they're still coming in. We're at almost 450 volunteer hours and counting, from 77 volunteers from 5 community volunteer organizations, plus over 250 hours of from 32 staff across multiple departments. New this year, our very own fire department stepped in and flipped the pancakes for the pancake breakfast. And there was additional beer gardens and entertainment on the Saturday night. Just a couple messages from residents. Thank you, City of Beaumont. My kids had a blast at the first ever Beaumont Days. Definitely makes us grateful that we chose such a great community to relocate to. Thank you for all your hard work. And another one was excellent weekend. As always, loved having the beer tent open with the live music on Saturday. The street party on Friday was so much fun. Thanks to everyone who contributes to all the activities behind the scenes and makes this happen. Always a highlight for us. So those are some unsolicited comments from some of our attendees. Canada Day is this Saturday, and we have activities from 2 p.m. to 11 p.m. in Four Seasons Park. All the details are available on our website. There's a full slate of performers on the main stage, beer gardens, interactive hands-on workshops and demonstrations, yard games, train ride, that's interesting. Foam party, okay, that's another interesting one. An obstacle course and a bunch of food trucks. I believe there's 8 this year. A foam party. I'm gonna have to check that one out. With the evening capped off with fireworks, of course. So we go to our website for more information. Also, there is an open house being hosted by the Disc Golf Club. Where the disc golf course is relocating to St. Vital Park. So the open house will be this Thursday, January 29th from 6 till 8. Neighborhood's been invited to attend, to meet with the group and discuss any concerns. Finance, remainder of the 2023 property taxes must be paid by this coming Friday, June 30th. It's always a favorite time of year to avoid penalties. Property owners have a range of ways to pay their taxes. It can be made at most financial institutions, online, telephone banking, or by mail. They can also come to the city hall during business hours to pay. We do have the TIPS program. If they are enrolled in the installment program, they'll just continue to pay their monthly installments, which have been adjusted for 2023. Infrastructure, parks assisted the Beaumont Minor Ball Association and Beaumont Soccer Association hosting their annual tournaments the weekend of July 23rd to 25th. Line painting, as you can see, continues to progress across the city. And we want to thank our residents for the patience they showed. Township Road 505 received significant storm damage. It was repaired by city crews on June 23rd, but we couldn't get in there because of the rain. And I mistakenly twice tried to come down the Spine Road in 510 only to realize that I can't. And one of those times decided to cut up 505. Well, I've never seen a road, quite frankly, in my life that was so deteriorated. But when it gets so much water and it washes away that you cannot put a grader on it or everything just sloughs into the ditch. So appreciate that was inconvenient for everybody. I'm hoping that's a very rare occurrence, but it's repaired. Yeah, you can have a look at it there. So if you were on it, good luck. There was no place to avoid. And that is my update. Thank you very much.
Thank you, CEO Schwartz. Any questions for CEO Schwartz as a report, content of it? Seeing none. All right. Next on our agenda this evening is item 9. Notices of motion. I believe we have one notice of motion I'm aware of coming this evening. Councillor McCook, would you wish to proceed?
At the July 11, 2023 council meeting, I will move that by the end of October 2023, administration prepare a report on options and costs for conducting public engagement on the city's various community events to identify opportunities for new events, enhancing current events, and potential options for making events more diverse and inclusive.
Thank you, Councillor. Appreciate that. Look forward to that motion in a couple of weeks. Any further notices of motion from members of council this evening? Seeing none. Our next item on our agenda is our next closed session this evening. And so with that, I will ask for a member of council to move into closed session, and I'll ask our guests to thank you for your attendance this evening, and we wish you a nice evening. Member of council willing to make that motion? Councillor Miller, please.
Sure, I move that council move into closed session at 8:43 p.m. pursuant to the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, Section 17 and 24.
Thank you, Councillor. Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, members of council, would you please vote on the motion to move into closed session? And that carries unanimously, 6-0. Thank you. We will move into closed session in a moment here when we're off camera. All right, we are live again back in a session after our closed session. There are no motions coming out of that closed session. So with that, I'll declare the meeting adjourned at 9:04. Thank you all for your attendance and enjoy your evening. Thank you.